What is not perfect for a new gardener is to get really overwhelmed with all of these details. When is the best time to harvest and store winter squash like this butternut variety that I grew here at my house? Well, if you look online, you may find a few best practices. I wrote them down on how to harvest and store this squash perfectly. Harvest squash when it's been at least 50 days since fruit set. Harvest once the rind has turned from green to a golden tan color. The squash should have a hollow sound when you knock on it. It should be hard to pierce with a fingernail. The stem should be brown, not green. And you should harvest with at least a couple inches of stem left, so this will preserve really well. It should not look like this, or it will not store very well, and it will likely rot if you so much as try to store it. Leave squash on the vine right up until the last frost, but make sure to harvest before a frost can come by and kill the plant or the fruit set. To cure squash, leave them outside for 10 days at 80 degrees Fahrenheit with 80% humidity. Once cured, they will store for around 8 months potentially if it's a butternut squash. Then to store them, keep them in a cool, dry place that's at 50 degrees Fahrenheit with about 50 to 70% humidity. Okay, I know that was a lot, and I'm gonna teach you how to keep things a lot simpler. One thing that's mentioned is to cure squash, you need to keep it outside at 80 degrees Fahrenheit in the sun with about 80% humidity. But how in the world are you gonna do that if you're waiting until your last frost to harvest these? If you need to leave that squash out for 10 days in the sun, but you're harvesting just before the last frost. So if there's frost in the forecast, that's not gonna be possible for you. There's other recommendations to bring them inside to a warm place at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, but if it's winter time, are you really getting your house up to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, even in a small space? Maybe, if you like it hot, but I'm not. I do think that all of these items listed are good best practices if you want to harvest squash at the ideal time and store it under the ideal conditions. But I would not call this the quotes perfect time to harvest or the perfect way to store winter squash. Especially for a new gardener, this can all seem very intimidating. If they're going outside to their plant and they're looking at the exact color it needs to be, it should be golden brown or tan and not green, the exact perfect way to harvest it, and then the exact perfect way to cure and store it. This is all really intimidating. If they read something that says if I pick a squash when it's green, it'll just rot, there's no point in even trying to do that, well then they might throw out this green squash, which actually can still be used and will still ripen off the vine. I think what's perfect can get in the way of what's good. And what's perfect for a brand new gardener, a beginner, is to just do things however you can, maybe learn from a few mistakes. What is not perfect for a new gardener is to get really overwhelmed with all of these details and get intimidated to the point where they don't even want to grow these or try anything new anymore. I think if a new gardener does things that are not perfect and they have a squash rot and they learn from that experience, it'll actually be way more impactful and a better lesson than if they followed all of the rules exactly right from the very start. But that's likely not even gonna happen, even if you pick your squash green. And I'll tell you exactly why. This squash, which is the perfect color for harvest, used to be quite green when I picked it, and I'll flash an image up on the screen right now. You can see that's what it looked like. It has actually ripened off the vine in my pantry where I'm storing all of my squash, and they're stored at about 60 degrees. It's not the ideal temperature, but I've stored them for about 2 months. Another thing, this entire basket of squash all used to be a dark green, or at least half green when I harvested them. You can see there's still some green striations in some of these. Some are still quite green, but you can see there's yellow in there. They're actually ripening just in my pantry off the vine, even though I picked them when they're not perfect. My take on all this is it's good to be aware of all of the perfect ways of doing something and read up on those, and then just go out and experiment and try it for yourself and see how things go. You're gonna learn a lot of lessons along the way. You're gonna make some mistakes, but it's gonna be a way more adventurous experience if you're just out there in nature, connected with your garden. You're not carrying a laundry list of items that you have to follow perfectly, and you can just go out, grow some squash, harvest them, and have some fun in the garden. Hey, if you want to see me harvest 24 butternut squash off this homemade arch that I built, check out the video right here.